good afternoon, or good evening, good morning, depending on wherever you are. I welcome you all to our Ecocivilisation talk today. My name is Jana Feirovit, and I work for GM and the Circular Business Academy, and I will be introducing this session today for Yuri. After our interesting talks on communities, today we begin with a new session, the Individuum. And I'm very curious to hear our distinguished guests speak about the Individuum's role in the Ecocivilisation. I'm sure that many of you already listened to the short introductory videos by our guests online on their view of Ecocivilisation and its importance. And today we will hear how the Individuum can learn and lead in a world of constant change. So what the challenges are and where are the opportunities that we can make the best of. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to make a few short notices. So this talk is organized by the Circular Business Academy and GM in cooperation with Violeta Bulc, the curator of the Ecocivilisation, and also the leading figure behind this initiative of introducing the concept of the Ecocivilisation. The talk is free of charge, which is due to the funding of the Public Fund for Scholarships and Professional Training of the Republic of Slovenia, and we are very thankful for this. Today's talk is one in a series of talks on the Ecocivilisation that started in spring. And this is our journey to imagine and to discuss the possible societal implications of this future world. As we see it, the transition to an Ecocivilisation constitutes a paradigm shift, and we would like to engage every single one of you in this discussion. So this is why we ask you to please send us your thoughts in form of an essay, and we will publish a certificate at the end of the autumn cycle of these talks. For this talk, there are some simple ground rules. So please contribute to the conversation. You can do this by raising your hand. And whenever you're not speaking, we do ask you to mute yourself so that you don't interrupt other participants. And as always, this talk is recorded and the materials will be available on our website afterwards. But now, finally, I would like to introduce today's speakers. So we all know Violeta Bulc, who is the curator of the Ecocivilisation and the former EU Commissioner for Transport, and she's going to be moderating this talk. With us, we have our guests. First of all, Curt Carlson, who has extensive work experience on innovation and entrepreneurship. He is a professor at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute and Northeastern University, and he teaches value creation and innovation. He also served on President Obama's National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship. As a CEO of SRI International in Silicon Valley, he worked from 1998 to 2014, and during this time, SRI became a global model for the creation of high-value innovations. His team also won 2 Emmys, one for HDTV and one for optimized satellite broadcast image quality. And he has also helped start over 25 new companies. So welcome to this talk. Welcome, Curt Carlson. We also would like to invite Sonja Klopčič, who is with us to share her views. She is an engaged developer of collaborative leadership in conscious organizations, as well as a mentor and a coach to executives. She is the author of the Energy Inside Leadership and the AEIOU of Leadership. And among many awards for innovations, she recently received a gold award for the model AEIOU of Leadership. As CEO, chair of board, and crisis manager, she gained valuable experience in a lot of organizations at different stages of their life cycles. Welcome, Sonja. And last but not least, Ramit Singh Chimni also joined us, and he started working as a pro bono activist for the empowerment of farmers in northern India. Now, for over a decade, he guided strategic and policy interventions in the development sector. He is a co-founder of the 8 Goals 1 Foundation, which was recently recognized as an iconic leader creating a better world for all by the Women's Economic Forum. Together with the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office, 8.1 organizes the FAIR project, which propagates the fairness paradigm that he also developed. He also presents his views at a fora of prestigious universities, among which also Harvard University. So welcome, Ramit. Welcome, everyone. We're looking forward to your contributions. And without further ado, I would like to give the word to Violeta Bulc to start this talk.
Jana, thank you very much. And a warm welcome from me too. Jana, if you could disengage from the shared screen, would be great. We can now engage directly in the conversation. It's been an incredible ride since this spring when we started with these conversations. And it brought so many fresh ideas, bold views into our circle, because at this point, we really do not have answers, but we have more and more really good questions. And I'm sure that today's conversation will be a strong contributor to exactly that, raising more questions, raising more interest in open cross-planetarian dialogues. And as Curt said before, there is a lot of different countries present today at this talk. And let's help each other. And would you mind just writing in the comment line in a chat which country you're coming from, and we will have then even better view over our audience and who is with us today in this virtual dialogue. So without trying to go too much into the broad perspective, let me just go straight into today's talk. And Jana, I will ask you to just take a look at what's going on in the chat room, and maybe later on you will share that information with us. As Jana already said, today we are continuing with our discussion on eco-civilization, and today's focus are beings. Today's focus is really individual contribution to the society, to the development stages, to creation of the momentum when things flip. And of course, this is part of the bigger picture, which we envisioned at this point. This might change completely in the future, but for the sake of our conversation, we created this framework, which has 5 core entities that we believe should be the essence of civilizational engagement altogether. Not to worry about tools, which we often do, being different economical models, education models, stock exchange, technologies, industries, but to really put everything in a relationship of the essential elements that hold life, that create space for life, which are beings, not only humans, but all other beings on this planet Earth, societies that get created with the engagement of these beings, knowledge and wisdom that is evolved and recognized and uncovered throughout the evolution, which I call consciousness, land that holds us, feeds us, and gives us a space within where we can really cooperate, meet, live, and of course relationships that glue all this together. And today the focus is on being. Jan already mentioned that we had an extensive discussions in the last 2 sessions on communities. We look at the global perspective and from the local perspective. And just briefly, I'd like to share a few of the elements with you, because I think they will matter for today's conversation. This is the model that we were addressing in the dialogues. And you can see that beings came in through the purpose and intuition, and of course, the relationships. And during the discussion, these 5 key questions started to emerge. What brings us together? What keeps us together? Who drives the development and what leads towards new civilizational paradigm? But at the top was all the time this question, who are we? And at the end, I tried to pull together a little model, which of course needs more work on it. But the reason why I decided to show it to you, because in spite of the fact that we talked about communities, we actually could not avoid but talking about individuals as well, individual level. And these are the elements that came through very strongly: identity, culture, values, emotional relationship, trust, behavior, curiosity and exploration, and vulnerability. And throughout the conversation, I have to say that trust was the most oftenly mentioned. So I put it at the top. So with that in mind, I'll move to today's session. Again, the discussion around the individuum will emerge around two parts. Today, we will focus on our abilities to learn, engage, understand, and I'm sure we're going to broaden the aspect even more than we expect. And on November 2nd, we will discuss more personal view, which will be the connection within. We will talk about heart, soul, mind, and higher self, and the way how these dimensions get challenged by all these dynamic, very much unpredictable changes that we are all facing today, along with the corona crisis. But I think that's just one of the elements, because this corona crisis, of course, coexists or serves on the top of many challenging things like globalization, like climate change, like digitalization, and what's the future really about shared values and currently very unfair redistribution of created value. So all those are big questions within which we sometimes feel so small. We feel that we cannot do anything. But I hope that even today's session will prove how important the individual in all this scheme is, and what can we do? How can we position ourselves in order to not only be shuffled around, but actually to co-create the wave of life. And with that, just briefly, I'd like to introduce the model that we see on the level of beings. And later on, you will see that one of our guests today largely contributed to what you see today here. What I'd like to bring your attention to is really the complexity of beings that exist on this planet Earth. And I dare to claim that humans are just one of them, not superior, but in very much the one who, through the level of awareness and consciousness, can actually bring a lot of good to this world by acknowledging the coexistence of the entire ecosystem. And of course, our own role within that ecosystem. This topic has emerged over the years, and I do recall the early stages in 2006 when we created first models for working with the transformation of different organizations. And without knowing how important that really is going to be in the future, we put the relationship with yourself in the middle of that model. And later on, when through the INCO movement, which is very closely related to with one of our guests today as well, more about that later, we created also a new view over what can really what is the individual, and touch the soft parts, and for the first time brought intuition into the business modeling, which was at that time quite a shock. But today it's a common practice and you see it everywhere. But through that we showed, and this is the last picture that I'd like to share, is this human, 6 human dimensions that really open up the space to think not only in our holistic, more spiritual life, but also in a day-to-day life, in business life, bring these soft elements strongly on board and understand humans as a complex, holistic being that has, besides physical and intellectual level, a strong emotional, spiritual level, social dimension. And at the end, all that gets reflected in the capacity of the energy that one of us possesses and can then manifest in a day-to-day life. And with that in mind, let me turn to our guests. I know you're all very anxious already to hear them, to see them, to feel them, like I'm excited too. And they were already introduced before, but so I will still claim a space when I introduce their core topic to talk with them a little bit about who they actually are. And the first one I'd like to sort of invite on board, if I may say that so, is Curt. Curtis and I go back about more than 15 years ago, and for many years we kind of lost touch with each other, and not that long ago, I could say even in few weeks ago, we managed to reconnect via LinkedIn, and the sparkle was there. Our first meeting was an hour and a half. He was rushing to a meeting, I was rushing to a meeting, but we just could not but inform each other about what was going on in the last 15 years. Curt, I don't know if you remember this little picture that I'm sharing right now, but this is from Stanford University when we met for the first time, and we were training with the little pencils. We were doing this stick game, which I was trying to explain to you that the monks used to calibrate the energies. I mean, that stuck in my mind so strongly, because even though you were at that time already the president of Stanford Research Institute, your curiosity and interest in something new was so strong. So I will always remember that energy that I met at that time, and the curiosity that you showed and fun that we had along the conference that was evolving there. But it was already mentioned that you're not only a director, a manager, a professor, but you're very much interested also in business, in the way how organizations work. I have to say that my first encounter with the power of your models came through learning about 5 disciplines of innovation. I was a very successful book that you and your colleague wrote, and it in such a simple way really sort of revealed such a powerful insight into how innovation actually works. And again, I will never remember when you explained that model to me and you said, I always look in people's eyes and look for sparkles. So with those sparkles in mind, I would like to invite you on board and of course, ask you the first question, which is, how are all these changes in our environment really affecting us? How do you feel it? And us individuals, our capacity to learn, our absorption capacity, our capacity to act. But let's focus on learning and your observation of us, an individual in this ever dynamic and evolving world. Curt, the world is yours. Please unmute yourself, Curt.
Thank you for that. That was some introduction. And we did have a love fest when we met. I think we hugged at the end of it. So you're very huggable, that's for sure. And this is a really important topic to discuss, and particularly about where the world is going, what kind of skills people need to have, and how do we give them those skills. So, when I went to SRI, it had been failing for 20 years. It was about to go bankrupt. Everybody hated each other because when you're failing, it feels like a world of scarcity. not a world of abundance. And you blame everybody else when that happens. And there are parts of the world and parts of every country that are like that, and it's very unfortunate. But my point of view in this discussion is going to be when you give people the skills, it's really quite remarkable what they can do. And it starts with the individuals. It starts with the topic of this discussion today, is that what we discover around the world, it's not just in America, it's in China and India and all the places we've worked, is that so many people lack the kinds of skills to make the full contribution they could make. So, for example, the people here today, everyone here I assume is a value creator. Now maybe that's not a word you would use, but everybody here wants to solve problems that'll make a contribution to the world. That means basically you're an innovator, you're a value creator. And when you say that, you realize it's not just business, it's social engineering, it's the environment. All the problems we have require individuals to have the skills to address those big problems that Violeta laid out so nicely. They're all going to be done by people who see the opportunities, ask the right questions, as you just said to start off with. That's where it all starts, with asking the right questions. And then how do you work and assemble the teams to be able to solve those problems? So what we've discovered around the world is that very few people have those skills. So the reason I'm now a professor at 2 universities is I saw what happens to people who've been failing for 20 years when they're given those skills. All of a sudden, they realize they can tackle the big problems of the world and they can change it for the positive. And whether it's in energy we've worked in, or education, or in business of various sorts, it really doesn't matter. When you have those skills, you literally have the opportunity to tackle those problems in a meaningful way. So then you ask the question, well, if our job, if everyone here's job is value creation to solve the world's grand challenges, and if you accept the premise that very few people have those skills, which we can go back to if you want, then the question is, what's the best way to learn? And the best way to learn is, it's got a name, it's called different things, but it's basically called active learning. You learn by doing. You only learn by doing. People have to be engaged. You have to tap into the passion, the motivations that Violeta also just mentioned. That's center. Without engagement, there is no learning. But with engagement and by doing, repeatedly doing, focusing on the big ideas, I transform people's lives. And that's what I've seen. And I've seen the transformation that makes for people and what it means to them. And those are the people I think that are going to solve some of the big problems we have around the world. So I've now devoted the rest of my life to that challenge of giving people those kinds of skills, whether it's at the elementary school level or whether it's at the graduate school level. How do we all become successful value creators, innovators, so that we can tackle the world's biggest, most important problems? And it starts with the individual. That's the only place it could. It's the only place it can. And it's about finding that empowering force that we all have.
Okay, Curt, could I now ask you more specific questions? I already mentioned before your 5 disciplines of value creation, but you also came up just a couple of years ago, or is it even younger, with 5 active learning principles. And your first learning principle says, iteration with real-time feedback. Why did you put that as the first one, and what does it really mean?
Well, the first one actually above that, in the paragraph above that, is engagement. So people have to be engaged first. So once they're engaged, and the way you keep them engaged is by doing the task. So whatever it is, if you want to be a carpenter, you need to be engaged in doing the work. If you want to be a musician, you need to practice 8 hours a day for 15 years or 20 years to become a master musician. But it's also true of social engineers and entrepreneurs. So for example, we work a lot with people who want to work on the social side, but they don't have the skills to put together the teams and form the ventures and do it in a sustainable way. so many of the social entrepreneurs we see want to do great things, but they're not permanent. They're not sustainable. And the goal is to make them sustainable. So they have to do a lot of work to learn how to do that before they can actually be masters at that. So it's the doing and the overdoing, the doing. And in the doing, it's not just doing and failing. People say sometimes it's about failing fast. It's not about failing fast. It's learning fast. When you're doing, you also need to have the feedback, which is how you get the learning, you get the input to help you learn fast. So it's doing and learning fast is the name of the game.
But inside that, there is one important element that kind of really pleasantly surprised me. And this is the importance of a real-time feedback. What can you say about that?
Well, if it's not real time, you tend to forget it or you ignore it. So yes. So in all of the work we do, it's real-time feedback is a steady feature of it, and it comes from multiple points of view. None of us are smart enough. Nothing I've done, but I remotely think that I could do by myself. It's just absolutely impossible. I mean, all the things that are on your list, Violeta, are multidisciplinary, if not interdisciplinary. And they take the input of many, many people, sometimes hundreds of people, who have the right perspectives and knowledge to be able to put together the innovation that you want to create. So you need to get those multiple feedbacks, because no matter who you are, you don't know enough.
That's true.
So we kind of jokingly say that when you start, how much do you know? Nothing. Pretty close.
That's a pretty good start. Then you're really eager to learn, aren't you?
Well, so then, but the question then again is, how do you learn fast enough to be successful?
Let's put at this point in your concept of mental models, because
okay.
I found this very innovative as well. Could you explain your motivation behind this important second point?
So mental models are basically things that become so second nature you don't have to think about them. So again, think of a musician. If they had to think about where their fingers are going, they couldn't play the cello or the violin or the piano, right? Working on solving problems you require similar mental models. So the first one is just probably the most obvious to everybody, is focusing on the real customer needs, not just the one you might think it is. Figuring out real customer needs is a very hard thing. And you can assume as a rule that when people come in to talk to you about a problem they want to solve, they never frame the need correctly. We've done workshops with 500 teams around the world. No team, and these are some of the most famous people you could imagine. No team has ever been able to think about the need that they're addressing accurately enough, specifically enough, to really be on the right path for the solution. So that kind of thinking, after a while, if you do it often enough, becomes kind of a mental model. So my teammates now, when people come in and present, they immediately start taking them, we call it from 100,000 feet down to ground level, where the real need is. Very hard skill.
Yeah, you're talking about so-called intrinsic knowledge to be tapped almost automatically, so that you have it at the back. How long does it take to develop something like that? To have this amazing model in the back of your mind?
I would say if you work really hard, 3 years.
Well, that kind of corresponds well with the statistics we have, how long it takes for a corporation to make a first more important change. It takes about 3 to 5 years.
I think every study will say it's not by going to a workshop or reading a book. You've got to do it. And that's why, again, we'll go back to motivation and the individual. If they're not passionately committed to making that contribution, it won't happen, and the change won't happen.
2 more things, and then I invite people to read about this 5 active learning principles by themselves. But I've been intrigued by you putting storytelling in the description of these 5 active learning principles. That's one thing. And the other one, that people do need frequent comparison. Could you just say a couple of words about storytelling and frequent comparison?
Yes. Well, so storytelling of some sort or another, we give it various names, bring it to life. But if you're coming up with a big idea, let's say it's a major social innovation, if people can't repeat the idea and why it's going to make a positive difference, obviously you're not going to move forward. So one of the challenges, particularly when you work with technical people like I do a lot, is they go into all the detail and they forget that other people can't move forward unless they can tell your story. So finding a way to tell your story in a way that people just can't forget it. When they hear it, they know it, they're not going to forget it, becomes fundamental to making progress. And by the way, with your team and recruiting your team, as well as in getting investments and getting politicians and others to listen to you and make it happen. The comparison part is an interesting part about learning. And it's often forgotten about. I would say it's the thing that's missing from most methodologies that I see in a lot of education. One of our great skills as humans is making comparisons. So Violeta, when you have lunch, do you compare the options you have?
No, of course.
What about a car? When you buy a car, do you compare the options?
Oh, don't ask me about that. But when I buy glasses, yes.
Okay. But when you do research, you compare data. We're comparing the temperature in the room, the lights in the room. We're comparing things all the time. And it turns out that's a really powerful way to learn. So in the methodology that we've developed, that we now teach, that you mentioned, the comparison part is really fundamental. So what does that mean? That means when the students come into the room and they present their value propositions for what they're working on, we use a very simple framework. So nothing, you can't, there's another principle. Any system that's too complicated doesn't work. It's got to be really simple or else people don't do it. So we have a very simple list of questions for them to ask. And they all, basically one after the other, they present and they get feedback and it goes really fast. So there's no delay so you can kind of forget it. But the learning happens, one of the powerful ways that learning happens is the students look at one presentation, then they look at the next one, they look at the next one, and they look at the next one. And because they're basically framed in a similar way, they can actually compare, oh, that person really did address the need. Oh, their innovation really does have a sustainable model to it. Oh, that one really does differentiate itself from the competition. So it may seem a little abstract here, but boy, I'll tell you, if you can set up a learning environment where that kind of comparative learning takes place, it looks almost like magic, how fast it goes, because they motivate themselves. You don't have to motivate people. It's always friendly, but their competitive juices kick in because they want to keep on doing better and better. And most people don't do that. Most people don't do that. They do individual instruction as opposed to this kind of team feedback, which does this comparative learning phenomenon. So it's actually a really big idea that's not used enough anywhere that I can see around the world.
Wow, fantastic. Curt, this was a great introduction to the whole topic of Individuum in possible civilizational paradigm. We will get back to you with some very concrete examples where you were able to use these 5 active learning principles. But before we do that, let's turn to our next guest and create this wholeness of our discussion together with 2 additional guests. Let me now ask Sonja to join us. And Sonja, I'm always a bit afraid, knowing you so well, that I will not present you well enough. I won't be challenging enough with my questions, but I do recall, and I will share one screen before we go further. Just a second. Sonja and I, besides trying to find the way to express and to bring to Slovenian overall business environment some authentic really elements that they can work with. We love to hike together. So this is the picture that you see on the screen from one of our hikes. And those hikes always are very full of inspiration as well. And we always come home with a bunch of new ideas that then try to manifest them within our own capacities. But Sonja went through the incredible life story from being an engineer. We met at the university, Electrotechnical University. And then she started soon a career as a manager, went through all the necessary experiences that manager has to go through, from sad to extremely happy and successful stories. And throughout that, she accumulated a rich set of experiences, as Curt's saying, very important. But at the same time, she was always trying to make a step further, build on those experiences and offer something back. So Sonja, it's great to have you with us. And I would love to hear your thoughts on what do you think is the role of individual in this ever-changing world, and in what is the individual possibility to co-create a change in the world in the future, and what is happening to our capacity to lead, to engage. This is your specialty. Sonja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Violeta. I'm really glad to be part of this dialogue today and have the chance to co-create, to add my part to this evolvement of the idea of eco-civilization. And as Curt said, that everyone is a value creator, I would say that everyone is a leader, at least of her or his own life. But some of us, we have also a greater responsibility, also formal position of leading people. And I would start my thinking about how may an individuum contribute to this eco-civilization from perhaps a different angle. I would start with a picture. I will, just a moment, I will share my screen. Do you see it? I'm starting with this picture created by a 16-year-old artist. And this picture for me is a symbol how we are all interdependent and how we are all connected, but looking in different directions, not talking to each other. And this picture for me is a symbol that we need to start discussing, engaging in a dialogue to collectively shape what is the best future for us. And that's why I'm so excited that today is also one of the spaces that we can be engaged in this co-creation. So for me, this picture is also a symbol of our children, grandchildren, a wake-up call for us. Start looking each in other directions, but start collectively sensing and shaping what is needed for the future. And for this, I think that we need to be aware that not just mindset, we need to cultivate our heart set, because heart is usually the one that gives us motivation to do something. And also in the times where we are perhaps forgetting about the climate change because of the coronavirus. But if we start to think about the climate change from the perspective of our grandchildren, then our heart set will lead us I believe, into a different direction. We will start to think how to create a decent living conditions for our children and grandchildren on our planet. And perhaps we tend to overlook another set. There's also a consciousness set. A consciousness, universal consciousness now allows us to be co-creator, to really engage, to really lead for the best. And this is something that we need also to cultivate, to nurture. So the complete set, mindset, heart set, consciousness set, and to have this global picture in mind is necessary to start engage in a dialogue and to really, each of us as Individuum, to bring to the table our own talents, our own capacity, and start creating a clear picture for all of us.
Sonja, let me ask you at this point. This is such a beautifully said. Is this consciousness set and this global perspective that prompted you into delivering this wisdom from 5 continents? And what is this wisdom from 5 continents? Please share it with us.
This is consciousness set because I felt that we as individuals now are in a different position to really lead, engage, and co-create, because universal consciousness is also evolving. And this gives us the leverage. So we need to expand our awareness, not just to our local problems, but start to look at the world from the global perspective. Because climate change is something we need to tackle as a humanity, as one family together. It doesn't help if in one part of the world we are creating zero emissions and so on, but on the other part of the world we are polluting. That's why, yes. And from this perspective, I really created this 5-dimensional model of leadership, bringing together the elixirs from 5 continents. Aroha, for example, meaning leading with love, which is totally different from managing with force. Or ape, meaning leading with systemic view. Or ikigai, living with purpose and mission. Oikos is pronounced in Greek, meaning creating value for all stakeholders, planet one of them. And Ubuntu, meaning building trust-based relationships. So this is the 5-dimensional model that I believe that it could serve as a path for each individuum. And I was really grateful that you, Violeta, included this model to a model of eco-civilization.
That's one of those that I mentioned at the beginning, that it will be revealed during the interview. Indeed, this is the basis for our being entity.
Yes, because I believe that our ancestors or indigenous people from 5 continents, they were much more connected with the nature, with cosmic cycle, with the wisdom of the life. And we forgot some of this wisdom, and we erased some of these connections, and that there's a time to remember again, to bring it back, and of course to combine it with the technology, with all the knowledge we have nowadays. So I believe this is something that is contributing to each person. But on the other hand, we have people that are leaders of organizations, leaders of countries, leaders of companies, and they have even greater responsibility. And I believe that they also need to make this change, the transition from mindset, heart set, and consciousness set to the transition from the old management school to the new or AEIOU leadership code.
Sonja, let me ask you at this point,
yes.
because this is really something that is emerging as a new, fresh view. How are the leaders responding to this?
Some of them, they take it as a truth, as each universal truth that when you hear it clearly, you just know it is the truth. Some of them are resistant to this because this old training, old narrative is still so imprinted in them, but not just in them, it is imprinted also in our society. We are always talking about competitive advantage, for profit for owners, for vision of one person, and so on. From that all the decisions needs to be made at the top and so on. So this is something that we need to dissolve. We don't have a switch to switch it in one moment, but we need time and we need some enlightened leaders who will lead the way.
But let me ask you here, because one of your approaches together with your colleague to spread this new understanding, this new awareness, is through mentorship. And if we took a deeper look at the 5 active learning principles, we would see that one of the details is also employ mentors and not just teachers. And you're also exercising that. Share a little bit the experience of this kind of teaching.
Mentoring and coaching is very important because it broadens a perspective. For example, to understand how to make the transition from the competitive advantage to work with a mission and purpose. When I was a coach to leader of one company who was involved in a debt collecting, and I offered a broader perspective. What is really their role in this line of business, if I may say so? And he came with a completely different view.
But your new line of business was?
Debt collecting.
No, that was the old one. What was the new proposition?
The new one was to understand the business as the supporter of the flow of the money.
Exactly, that's an incredible shift.
And if you understand that your mission is to really do everything to create all the needed circumstances that the flow of the money would go through company, to company, then your approach is completely different. This is kind of transformations we are seeking, and I believe that each such a transformation sparkles a new transformations in other companies.
This is a very good opportunity to maybe bring the third guest on board, and then Sonja, I have several more questions for you, because I really would like us to discuss what Aroha, what App, Ikigai, Ecos, and Ubuntu mean in the environments where you pull them from. So we'll get back to that, but let me now move on to our third guest. And I would like to express my warm welcome to Ramit. Ramit, we've met just a few weeks ago. I could say that in a very unusual way, in one of the summits, web summits in India, the World Economic Forum. And soon after, you sent me an email saying, would you mind joining my young team of students and share what you shared at the World Economic Forum with? And of course I said yes, but I had no clue what I was entering really. I mean, it sounded very exciting. And I have to share with the audience that what really attracted me was the fact that you used very unusual introduction to the training that you're offering to your colleagues, to your colleague students. For a year, you brought together a group of people from the entire India, and the only purpose was to expand their minds, to give them the skills to think and to be able to create within this expanded mind the future. How can anything be more exciting than that? Ramit, how did that came about, and how did you, through this engagement with young people, experience this ability to understand? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Violeta. I think, just to begin with, first off, I'm just going to take a segue and thank Maya and Rajni for having their cameras on, because other than the five of us who have to keep their cameras on, it's really heartening to see more people joining in. And it becomes warm, because then we recognize that we're not alone, right? There are more and more of us who are having these kind of conversations that are just so important. So thank you, Violeta, and to the CBA for organizing this. This is absolutely fantastic. Right? How did it come about? I'll tell you, Violeta, I think it came about a lot from what I was seeing all around me, at least here in India, with the youth, with myself as well, is the fact that we've all seemed to be always running out of time, right? We always seem to be on a clock, and life just seems to be moving extremely fast, right? And at different times, I noticed even Curt and Sonja mentioned this in different ways, where Sonja very categorically said that we need time. Change will not happen instantly. There is time that is required. Curt actually said something which to others may have sounded a bit diametrically opposite to that, where he said that we need to think fast and act fast, right? But I think what I really took from everything else that he said around that was the amount of time that he is giving to the people that he is advising and speaking to and trying to motivate, right? And it is about giving that time to our youth, because unfortunately, and that's a harsh reality of our world today, in which we must understand when we look at positives and we look at how to make change, we must understand what's really troubling our youth today. It is this fast pace of our world, where it's difficult to try and move as fast as the world is in alternate directions, right? Because there are certain directions that the world has set for us, and we move in that direction and everything moves extremely fast, literally as if we were in a highway with cars whizzing on all sides and you're standing right in the middle. And while everything is moving so fast, you cannot move, because if you move, the safest is to just stay still, right? And that's where I realized that a lot of our youth today doesn't have that freedom to move, to be able to explore, right? And when move, not just physically, but move in their minds and move their thoughts and so on and so forth, where we said, as what you very rightly said, it was literally as simple as that let's get together and let's talk. It's all right. We have hours on end. We've got a lot of time. Relax. There is no fuss. There is no deliverable at the end of this. It's not that you need to make a presentation and we're working towards that. It's your time and your space, right? Let's talk about the things that you otherwise can't talk about, right? Or are unable to talk about. And what was wonderful, Violeta, really is that we realize a lot of the reasons why the youth does not speak as much as it does, right? About themselves, about their real thoughts, why they tend to follow certain ideologies and certain thought processes, right? Even though for a large part, it may not really be their own thought process, right? And I think just that entire recognition was absolutely fantastic. And if you don't mind, I would want to share some of the things
yes,
that.
Please. Because I really, that momentum when you told the students, hey, you're going to spend a year together just to expand your minds. I mean, how incredibly different that is.
We didn't even expect that we'd get any applications, to be very honest, right? But because who wants to spend time talking about being fair and having these conversations about a better world and fairer world, which is not really leading to something, because it wasn't linked to business. It wasn't that, oh, let's create more sustainable businesses. It wasn't linked to that employment, oh, we'll make sure that you become more employable at the end of the day. Right? There was really no end objective, if you would talk about, except for just being better human beings, being more thoughtful. And then to have so many people come in, and frankly, it didn't seem out of place at all, because they wanted that opportunity. And that's what I realized, that we were wondering that will we actually get as many applications as we did? But the reality is they're all looking for an outlet. They're all looking for an opportunity to be able to present themselves, because, and these are the thoughts that actually ended up coming and that got developed along the way as to why they've not been able to do that, right? It all actually starts with right when they were children, right? And I think this is something that I keep talking about a lot for the last 1 year, is that, and just in terms of eco-civilization as well, you showed us that entire link between the world and the individual with the communities in the middle, but then the fact that there is this entire scope. But how are we taught about our world in the first place, right? For those of you who remember back in whatever grade 1, grade 2, whenever it is that you were told about the world, you were told about the world through maps and globes, right? Now, do we recognize what's actually happening there? What's actually happening is that we're being taught about our world through these lines that are on these maps and these globes, which actually don't exist, right? And that's what we're seeing. So when we understand the world, we see it with these boundaries and with these divisions and all of these various other dichotomous positions that are present in our world today. And that forms a blueprint for the rest of our lives. Because for everything else, we're looking at things with these boundaries and with these, trying to find limitations, saying, what's the limit to this? And then even when we are talking about innovation, we talk about, let's cross the limit. But who's decided this limit in the first place, right? And that just becomes a way that people start looking at things when they were younger, and when they grow up, when they become young adults, it becomes even more, because the stereotypes increase, right? So what ends up happening is that we start talking to people about, oh, are you X or are you Y? Are you left wing? Are you right wing? Are you a Hindu? Are you a Christian? Right? All of these kind of concepts start coming about, where we're given options, and those options are presented to us and said, then now choose which one is it, right? And then at the end of the day, what you'll end up being is either a conformist or a rebel, right? Yeah. Where can you really be yourself? Because you're choosing something that the world has given to you, and you're choosing from that. But are you really asking yourself what you are? And just in terms of religion, I'll give you that example, right? I am neither a theist nor an atheist, right? Now, what people end up assuming is that I'm agnostic, because again, those are the terminologies that people end up using. But an agnostic is someone who doesn't care, right? I care. I want to know whether God exists or not. It's just that I don't know right now. I don't think anyone's given me a compelling argument one way or the other, but I really want to know. The closest I'll probably come to it, and again, in terms of stereotypes and tags that we get, is this concept that I heard recently about being a seeker agnostic, right? It amazes me as we keep coming up with these tags. But it's not even that, because a seeker agnostic that then I understood was someone who doesn't believe in God, but would really want to, because then he wants to tie in with the rest of society. But I'm not that either. So.
I mean, let me jump in here, because I think in our previous discussions on communities, this identity came very strongly through. But the way how we were able to explore this identity was actually beyond the text. Yeah, so maybe this is part of the historic sort of frameworks, which we just need to get out of, because if we acknowledge humans through all these 6 dimensions that I shared with all of us before, then there is no labeling. It's a dynamic stage of expanding all our 6 senses and 6 dimensions. And that's where the beauty is. So have you seen these changes in the youth? Because you were taking them through different discussions throughout the entire year, and the cycle is over. What did you realize or learn at the end? How did their understanding expand?
So I think one of the most heartening parts of this entire exercise, Violeta, was the fact that most of us, right, almost all of us, changed our minds multiple times, right? And, when you say it out to the rest of the world, and I just said it out right now, it just seems that, does that mean that we were fickle-minded? Does it mean that we were not sure of ourselves? Does it mean that we didn't do adequate research to come up with an opinion, right? But that really wasn't it. The idea always was that at that point of time, right, keeping certain core principles in mind, like the principles that you've got for eco-civilization, what are the positions that you hold at that point of time? Now, if circumstances changes and if things change, if there are more things that you understand, you develop, your mindset develops, your understanding develops, right? Why should you not be able to change your mind? Right? Why should you then be blocked down by something that you had said previously? And it's not a bad thing. Again, people keep talking about, those people living in glass houses shouldn't stow thorns, practice what you preach, those kind of concepts, which are very positive concepts, right? But they're also limiting to an extent because they make us stick on to what we said. And I saw, most of us, we started, I'll give you a quick example about India just came up with a new education policy, and education is as important as it is, even in this conversation. And there were a lot of us who were up in arms about the education policy. Then we started reading it more and we started understanding what's actually going on. We started liking it, supporting it, right? Then again, we suddenly realized a particular angle that we hadn't seen before because someone talked to us about it and said that, okay, but this is also what's happening. And then we suddenly realized that, oh no, guess what? But this is a consequence. We have to be aware of this consequence, right? That sort of an evolution, I think, is very, very natural. It is human. It is evolution. And just the way that we have evolved as human beings over all these years, we have to let our minds evolve, and we can't stop our minds from evolving. It's extremely crucial so that all of us understand that our mind will always be ever evolving.
Do you recall any of the responses that the students gave you? And just for the sake of understanding, besides me, how many speakers did you have in this cycle of the first year? And I do recall the way how I felt when I met your students at the end of this cycle. It was really hard to keep up with them. They were extremely open. I did not expect, especially women from India as well, to be so open, and the boys being so respectful towards lady colleagues, and just the way how their questions were like really coming from some sort of global awareness already. So I said at the end, I don't think I've ever been so strict in front of anyone than in front of these kids, because the questions were straight to the point. So what were their reactions? Were they aware of their development?
So I think that's a tricky bit, I think, because at the end of the day, I think all of us collectively agreed that we've just got a long way to go, right? I think we're just at the start of this, right? Again, all of them are happy to come back next year. All of them want to be doing these things for themselves, for people in their communities, in their schools, colleges, and their workplaces and all of that, right? But I'll tell you, just because you mentioned our interaction, I will tell you the other side, their side of it as well. They were in awe of you, Violeta, right? You gave us almost 3 hours, right, of your time. And frankly, I think you were so much at ease in that conversation. And while you're saying all these things about being astonished by them, but what they loved is that you were so accommodating. You were willing to give them time. You were willing to talk to them. You weren't ignoring any question. You weren't making your point. You were always trying to understand their point and speak about that, right? And again, coming back to the original thing is, if people need to give time to the youth and to everyone else around you, and the fact that you did that was fantastic for them. And but no, in terms of reactions, I will tell you this, right? I think they all recognize the practical aspects of the fact that they will be going on and working at different companies and corporations and so on and so forth. They recognize that they'll be doing different varied kind of things, right? But what is heartening again, and I think I mentioned this before as well, is that at least now they will think more about the things that they're doing, right? And at least now that the conversations that they will have with people, as what you witnessed, will not merely be, okay, so let me hear what you have to say. No, I want to engage in dialogue. I want to understand, why is it that you're saying what you're saying? Sure, fair enough. Maybe you're absolutely correct. Maybe you're 100% correct, but I still want to dig deeper, right? If I don't understand it for myself, merely saying that I agree with you is not enough, right? Because if I agree with you, I need to be able to speak to somebody else and make them agree as well. And then so on and so forth, right? Until the time I don't have active dialogue, I will not be able to do this. And that's probably the one takeaway that I really like. One of the students has started their own podcast. So I think they've done more podcasts than we have. So, which is fantastic.
Well, that is fantastic. New student always has to go broader and higher than the teacher. So that's great. That's a compliment to you.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of fun. And a lot of others have expressed their interest in working with us for the next 6 to 12 months over their weekends, because they want to do more. They want to develop more courses around this. And all of them just are excited, again, like I said, to have these conversations, because guess what? This is what is lacking today. Which is what you're fulfilling right now as well, by having these conversations right now.
Fantastic. While you were talking, I saw Sonja nodding a lot, and I think we need to give her a chance to comment. But at the same time, Sonja, I would ask you a question. Can you relate to what Ramit was sharing with us? And can you see this kind of characteristics also in the leadership? And please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes. It was really great listening to this process, Ramit. And I really imagined a team of really curious, creative people expanding their awareness. So great. And yes, it's not enough that you say, I agree. It needs to be really digested. It needs to be really deeply comprehended and embodied, not just understood, but embodied. And then you can share this message with others. And in relation with leadership, this means, yes, you got 30 or how many people, new leaders for the future, and wherever or whatever they will be doing, they will create a better place for all. I'm sure about it. And I would correlate this very much with 2 dimensions of the AEIOU. One would be with Ubuntu. Ubuntu, I am who I am because you are who you are. I am because we are. And to understand that we need other people, and to be engaged in a dialogue with other people, to create also ourselves. This would be one, and another with Aroha. Aroha, a Maori word for love and empathy, and also generosity. I felt that this was really a connection with the team you had the potential to support. Thank you.
Sonja, thank you very much. I'd like to now go back to Curt. Curt, there are some questions already for you in the chat, and I would invite Aditya Awashi to raise it openly, and Curt, you will be invited to reply. But before we go there, Jana, could you just share with us the information? Where are all these beautiful people coming from?
Oh, they are coming from lots of different places, actually. Let me see. We have Serbia, we have Norway, we have Slovenia, Russia, India, Zimbabwe, Germany, and Croatia.
And California.
Yes, of course. This is excluding our panelists. So yeah, there's a colorful bunch.
Super, thank you very much.
And we have a lot of questions, actually, so please go ahead.
Let's start. Jana, if you have a control over who raised the question first. I already invited our colleague. I think she's from Zimbabwe. and she can raise the question first, and then let's go one by one, the way how they came on. And I would ask Jana, you to take care of the order. Thank you very much. But let's start with the first question to Curt. Just unmute yourself, please, and go ahead. Say it loud.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sitting here in utter awe because this is completely a different world. Where I am a scholar of Ubuntu, and I believe I am because we are. I strongly believe that. However, I have, what troubles me, and this is across all the panelists, is how do you actualize this in a very difficult world, particularly when you look at the post-COVID era where everyone is really struggling to just find who they are? How do you remind the world that we need together to be? Thank you very much.
Curt, go ahead.
Oh, what a great question, because that really is the issue. It's not just the what, it's the how. And most people focus on the what and not the how. Now, just I want to come back to that, but first I want to tie what Sonja and Ramit said together, because I resonated very strongly with both of them. With Sonja, her list of leadership characteristics actually is a major movement around the world. So I just was part of the World Agile Conference, and everyone is struggling to move that way. I was just at the Director Forum, and the guy who runs General Electric appliances actually would agree with every one of your principles, and he's completely transformed that company, completely. You know, you think that's a business that left America 100 years ago. No, he's winning, and his people are engaged and what have you. I would say your word love is probably a little strong for most CEOs. So, but empathy, involvement, respect, those human characteristics are fundamental to the new management that we see around the world.
Curt, do you want to say that love is not fundamental to human being?
I do. I'm just saying that it's a strong word for a CEO. And I actually believe in it. If you asked me if I loved my people at Esther, I would easily say yes. I mean, no doubt about it. I put my employees first above everything else, and I loved them. And so I agree with her. I'm just saying that for each audience, there's a way to say these things that resonates better. Back to Ramit though for a second, because you know, the kind of empowerment he was building into those teams is exactly what I was trying to describe as well. And that kind of engagement, it's intense. I'm sure when you brought those students together, the discussion's going like crazy, right? So it's exactly what I was talking about. It's that kind of rapid involvement because they really are engaged. And back to the question, if you have to put those ingredients together, if you can put those ingredients together, it's amazing what happens. So in business, you know, you might think like my example of GE, an appliance business, like, how do you do that? That seems crazy. You know, it's such a hard-nosed business. But because the CEO had those attitudes and those values, he actually instilled them. And he gave up all the power things that normally you think about with a CEO in those kinds of positions. He just flipped it on its head. And he pushed all the authority down to the bottom, where, again, going back to Ramit, where the people could be engaged and work together and create that sense of community that you were describing so well, beautifully, by the way. So you can do it, but it takes a different mindset to do it. So that's what this discussion is about, is realizing that if you give up a lot of those power tools that you think you have, you can actually make this work, and your people will be engaged, and you'll be more successful as a business. It seems like a paradox, but it's not.
I hope that answered the question. Thank you very much. It was very clear and straightforward. But Jana, who's next?
So the first is actually a comment from Martina. She was saying about your concept of ecocivilization, to think about the inclusion of fungi and algae as they represent their own kingdom of beings. So,
yeah, I saw that comment, and thank you very much. Definitely, we are adding it to the whole family of beings on this planet Earth. As I said, the whole model is in evolutionary phase, and at the end, we will co-create it. So this is a very important little addition. Thank you very much.
Then we have a very practical question from Dimitri to everyone. His question is about mass psychology and tendencies and how we can implement a simple waste separation system in countries, whether we need the government to be active here, and what the right psychology behind it might be. So is it to reward people who do this, or is it to punish those who don't?
Well, that is a question I would like now to ask our three guests to reply to it from their three different angles. It's a question of circular economy, but everything we've heard today, it's very applicable. So Curt, from the capacity to learn, how can we attack that problem better? From the capacity to understand, Ramit, how can we engage better? And Sonja, from the capacity of leadership, how can we engage better in order to get this done? Please.
I always want to start with a big idea, a big positive idea. I hate using force and authority to make the case. And usually there is a big idea. And if you can come up with it, then you can engage people. And most people, again, jump too quickly to the power tools and to their, this, I'm right and you're wrong, without that dialogue. So that I'm always looking for the big idea. What's the big idea that will move the world forward?
Thanks, Ramit.
So from my perspective, it's about realization, right? I think to a large part of the world, and I speak a lot about India and people around me, they don't understand what the repercussions of not separating your garbage is, right? And again, we understand, we keep talking about, the plastic island in the Pacific Ocean is one of the largest in the world, and so on and so forth. But these are very big picture things that we don't see with our own very eyes, right? I think the moment we need to trust human beings a bit more, right? And if they realize the consequences and they're shown the consequences, we take the time to explain to them the consequences of not segregating your waste, I think you'll see a lot more people change. Because at least I'll say it from my experience, anyone that I have, and we speak a lot about waste as well, waste management, and anyone that we've explained the actual consequences thereof, you see that change happen, because they recognize it, they see it, it's not top level, it's in front of their eyes, and then it's very hard to take your eyes away from that. And I think trusting humans with this information, where they can make up their own mind and or do this of their own volition, is wonderful. And as Curt said, I just want to reiterate that the iron fist concept just doesn't work beyond. Right? It just doesn't. Right? You can't force people or compel people into things like this. It has to come from within. For that, you need to empower them, give them the knowledge, and wonders can happen.
Thank you, Sonja.
Yes, children are great leaders here. And if we work with children, as for example, here in Slovenia, in kindergartens, children know very well why we need to separate our garbage. And then in their families, they are the one that are leading their parents. So this is simple solution from the leadership point of view.
So Oikos will work here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Jana, back to you.
Okay, then we have a question from Matjaž. He already had to leave, but he was really interested in the discussion and hopes to get an answer. And it was actually backed up by a comment from Barbara. So Matjaž says, does it make sense to invest so much into artificial intelligence, machine learning, modern technology, when there is still so much traditional knowledge and wisdom that is almost forgotten or may die out? This relates to what Sonja said, I believe. And Barbara added, the real challenge is to combine the two worlds, organic, sustainable, reusable, including traditional experience, and then link it with the digital world. So what are your comments on that?
Well, thank you very much. And Curt, you are from Silicon Valley. So you're sitting at the heart of the emergence of artificial intelligence solutions. So what's your take on it?
Well, indeed, we created Siri that's now on the iPhone. So we're certainly in the middle of this. Yes, we're certainly in the middle of this. Well, there are two answers, I guess. One answer is it's going to go on. So even if you thought it was the worst thing in the world, it's going to be very hard to stop. I think, again, it's this flip that the other two speakers are talking about, is how you think about these things and how you use them. So, for example, here in California, 80% of Black children fail basic math and reading every year. California is a very progressive place. I mean, it's almost a socialist, country in America. Everybody says they care about these children, but nothing happens. But some of the work that we've been doing is, how do you actually use these technologies to actually help these poor children who are basically being cut out of the future we're all talking about here.
Just for clarification,
Kurt,
so you're talking about computer tools, so digital tools that support art of the active learning techniques. Okay.
Correct. And it really is active learning. So again, all the things we talked about, engagement, community, teams, feedback, all those things can be brought together in new ways. We were not there yet, but I'm just pointing out that all these things are flips. There's things we really don't like. There are a lot of things about social media that are terrible, but there's also the flip side of that is helping us solve some of the biggest problems in the world. And for me, one of the biggest problems all around the world is education. That's really fundamental. Without that, it's so hard. And in America, for Black children, it's just terrible, terrible.
Well, really good luck with your tools, because you shared with me some exciting results already, and also with students and professors. So let's continue this dialogue on active learning, because there is something emerging which I also feel that can contribute to a more open and more engaging world. But Ramit, do you remember in our discussion with students, I asked them if they know when the concept of internet was for the first time created now? Of course, I had similar experience with my students all over. And usually they go back to, let's say, 1956 when ENIAC was created, and then they say that was a big movement. Yeah, but in fact, the concept goes all the way back 3,500 years before Christ, and we saw it in the drawings of the Indian gods. And I remember at that time I explored with your students a thought that maybe we needed the internet to see how much we know, to see how much we can do, because all of a sudden everything is available to everyone. And probably internet is by far the most democratic tool ever developed in the history of humankind. So how would you respond to this question, and in a format of really tools, technical, digital tools, helping us to acknowledge, to understand, to learn, but at the same time, do you think at one point we will be able to just drop it because we will be able to develop other means of sharing, engaging? What's your take on that?
So I'll tell you, Violeta, and I think just to matters and to what Curt said as well, I think I personally have always been a very, very major skeptic of technology, right? Majorly so. And that's not because I'm anti-development or I don't want to unleash the power of the human mind and so on and so forth. But it's the direction that technology ends up taking is what I really always worry about, right? And just the way what Curt explained right now, that is how technology needs to be used. We're all smart enough, right? No one is doubting the intelligence levels of human beings to be able to create, to be able to develop, to be able to make AI work. But the real question is, what will it be utilized for? Right. And that is where I think we just need to make sure, all of us just need to make sure that we are pointing our efforts, our growth, our progress, the speed at which we are growing in the right direction, right? And it may not always be possible. It's absolutely okay, but then we need to then empower those individuals who are trying to make it move in that direction. Like Curt mentioned absolutely perfectly, that the real thing that AI and ML that Martez was talking about can solve is education. And that's so much needed in our world today, right? But we need to empower those companies, those individuals who are taking AI in that direction, right? While being a bit aware of the other alternate directions that AI has already gone to and can potentially go to. And that's the balance that we really need to try and find and create in our world, which is a little difficult. But I'm sure with the kind of thought processes sitting in Silicon Valley, of whom one Curt is with us right now, we will end up finding those directions. There'll be more of us who'll be able to find that direction. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Violeta, but I really wanted to get that in with respect to what Curt said.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. That leads me to expand this question even more with Sonja. I think that there is one element from your AEIOU model, which is Ikigai, that we have not really zoomed in on. So what do you think? What is the role of leadership in bringing the best out of technology? And does that have anything to do with reason for being? Please.
Oh, this is a really tough question. If I would split it to two questions. First, about technology, artificial intelligence. I would say, and the question was before, what about this ancient wisdom? We need both. We need both, because in times of big data, Internet of Things, we don't have enough capacity and time to to really understand and comprehend all the connections between the things, and that's why we need artificial intelligence. But on the other hand, we need the wisdom how we will use artificial intelligence. Because it may narrow our view, and that's why, and it may affect our mindset. That's why we need both wisdom and artificial intelligence. And the role of leaders, in managers in this, is to really insist to instill this wisdom to the AI and to understand how can AI leverage their business models, how can they benefit out of it, and to connect this with Ikigai, which is really a very interesting combination. Ikigai means life with a purpose, life with a reason, and also work with a mission.
That's exactly, Sonja, what I had in mind.
Yes.
That is exactly the one, because
yes,
we do technologies with the mission, with the purpose from our hearts, then it will be right.
And
Don't
this
you
is,
think so?
Yes, this is the right path. What is the mission, and what is the purpose, and what can support to really deliver this?
Super.
Okay.
We are almost done. We set 90 minutes and we have to stick with our schedule, even though that questions are popping up. But I would take the last question that was raised by Maya Tushke. And Jana, go ahead. Let's take a look at that question too. And while we are listening to it, I would like to ask our three guests to also take this question and try to also link your own contribution today, your own work, to possibility of the emergence of new civilizational paradigm. Can you feel it? Is it a very scary or too bold of a statement, or can you feel that there is enough sort of new things evolving that we could expect a bigger change in our awareness, consequently consciousness, and consequently a new value set, which will lead to a new civilizational paradigm. But let's start with Maya's question.
Maya would like to know, how do we create planetary consciousness and plant enough healthy seeds to create respectful and cooperative communication? In this way, is it important, how is it important to define crucial knowledge for the future and make our school innovative?
Let's start with Sonja now, and we'll go backwards. Sonja, go ahead. That relates partially to your work as well.
I believe that planetary consciousness is created. It's already there. We need to adjust ourselves to really be able to connect and to synchronize. And this is the work of each individuum to do. And what was the other part of the question?
The part was also, how do you feel, are we creating enough awareness and congestion of new emerging elements to see really the development towards new civilizational paradigm?
Okay, yes, I said the work of each individuum, and when we will have this enough number of individuums that will be able to really synchronize with universal consciousness and to synchronize to each other, then this change will happen. So I think we are here on the move, individuums. Now, everything else is set already.
Let's keep walking this path. Thank you, Sonja. Ramit, what do you think?
So I'll be very honest with everybody. It's an extremely difficult task, right? I think we need to recognize how difficult it is. And once we recognize how difficult it is, we will put in all the effort to make it happen, right? So can it happen? 110% it can happen, right? If that was a possibility. But without recognizing how difficult it is, without recognizing that there are a lot of people in our world who are motivated with the reverse of what we're talking of right now, right? And they will always have motivation that can sustain them, right? We need to make sure that our motivation also sustains us, right? Where these conversations are not one-off. These conversations are not a single dialogue. There are more and more of these dialogues that we all help create all over our world, right? Whether it's in our own houses, whether it's on a global scale like you've done, Violeta, or wherever it is, right? As long as we continue to have these conversations, and as what Maya said as well, right? I think she's talking about creating respectful and cooperative communication. The key part of that is communication. And I honestly believe language has lots of forms. It's not just the words that we speak. If you're sitting with somebody who doesn't speak your language and in their homes, you will find a way to connect if you're willing to communicate, right? And that's what all of us need to do. And we can. It's difficult, but it is definitely achievable if we all get to it and keep at it. So keep at it, everyone. That's really what I would like to say.
Thank you very much, Ramit. And Curt, now we started with you. We will finish this conversation with you as well. So what's your take on all this?
Well, I think it's happening. The groups that I belong to are having these discussions now in a way that didn't happen even 5 years ago. When you go to the World Agile Conference, and this is the topic with companies all over the world, that's a change. Sonja's great list, which would have seemed absolutely kind of crazy 10 years ago, with a few words maybe moved around. But that's on the table in every one of those meetings I go into, is how do you empower people to be more productive and have more meaningful lives? So I would say it's happening. I'd say a good word for technology. We can't solve the problems of the environment or poverty or education without technology. It's not going to scale fast enough to make the impact. The good news is, even though we're looking at this environmental issue that's horrifying in the extreme, innovation is actually going to solve that problem eventually. The solutions are already been identified and where people are working on them. So That's the good news on that side. And you think about this technology we're using right now. This is still a very primitive technology. Imagine this technology 10 or 15 years ago, and the level of collaboration that's going to be possible between any place in the world, in the worst parts of Africa or India, where people are just, desperate for knowledge and for education. It's going to basically make the world transparent. I often talk about the transparent world, and we're going into that. So this discussion is just going to keep on being amplified. So I think there's a lot of great progress. I see it in the education schools that I'm part of. Active learning, though, I think is part of it. It's this engagement in doing and doing and doing. That's how you get people to have the right skills, the right values that Sonja and Ramit mentioned. And it's going on. It's just slower than anybody wants. That's all. It's a lot slower than we want. That's why we're here, right?
Exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you to Curt, to Ramit, and Sonja. This was a very broad, engaging, and very future and today oriented discussion. I'm happy because the topic Individuum and Ecocivilisation is yet another topic which is expanding our minds. As many philosophers often say, once you expand your mind, you create space within which you can engage. So broader your mind, broader the space for engagement. So I do hope that we have done a bit of that today. I'm so grateful to all of you who joined us from all continents of this beautiful planet Earth. And don't forget, November 2nd, we continue discussions on Individuum and Ecocivilisation. This time we will take a look inside the human being with some very interesting guests. I'm not going to reveal them yet, so please check our emails and posts on social media to learn who these guests are. But I certainly hope that our today's guests will stay part of our community. We will keep you informed, guys. You're always welcome to join us, and we hope to have you back in even more provocative engagement, because simply, as Curt said, we're going to know more. So thank you very much to everyone, and be safe, be healthy, and keep creating.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also from my side, thank you for joining today, and check out the website and inform yourself about the topic and the speakers. Thank you for today.
And today's discussion will be published in a matter of hours on the web pages, again, on CBA and on the Ecocivilisation page, and conversation continues. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Violeta. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.